Hi Daniel, I'm trying to make another video this time. I recorded it, I'm going to check it so that I'm sure. Okay, so I, as said, maybe I analyzed two games. I analyzed our game and your game from the competition. And from this, I took the liberty to construct a small lesson about a certain team, which I will also talk about. I will also send you some links and some exercises. I will begin with the two games. So the first one, which is our game, I must say that, yeah, the opening, you can look at the opening yourself. The opening is certainly fine for black. And the critical moment, I think, is after your move, knight e4. So a little later, queen e7, rook c2, you speak about the various elements of position. But if you look at the position after queen e7, and I read the things that you see, I wanted to ask you what your evaluation is of this position. Who do you think is better, white or black? Now, I wanted to ask you, this is the first time, but I want to ask it repeatedly in this video. I wanted to ask you more than once to, no, I will ask you sometimes something in the video, and then I will ask you to put the video on pause and to think about the thing that I asked. And immediately afterwards, I will give my point of view on it. So this is the first question, and the question is simple: who is better, white or black? You can pause, read the arguments, and then you can answer for yourself. Now, I think black is better. And the second thing is you give various arguments. What is the most important thing why black is better? You can pause again and try to find one element which makes his position superior. I think the main issue is the open file, the control over the open file. A second thing which I found very annoying while playing here was the position of my queen. Your queen, if you compare both pieces, your queen is standing, how to say, it's not under attack. So it's standing very stable. My queen is or can be attacked quite easily, and there is no real safe haven for it to find. Now, at this point, you played rook c2. Better move at this point is rook c7 at once. And in the other game, you make a mention where you just calculate the number of pieces around the king to judge whether your opponent has attacking possibilities or not. And this is the same here. So the queen is forced to the king side, which in itself is not dangerous, because if you count, you can see that only the queen is in the attack. The knight on e5 is not participating even. It's only pushing on f7, but there's no problem. So for your king, this is very safe. The downside of this for white is that obviously the queen is absent from the queen side now, and black is able to get very strong play on the queen side, where the queen is now lacking as a defense. Now, you can see that. No, I will talk about this a bit later. So you played rook c2, and you can see this is slightly better for me than it should have been, because the queen is now also on the queen side. It's helping with the defense. But the main issue about the c file remains. Now we continue, and a5 is of course a major blunder because of knight e2. Now I wanted to look at two crucial moments, and I wanted to ask you to think about the better moves that white has at this point. The first one was at this point, so black plays knight e4 on move 18, I believe, or move 17. I'm stopping sharing for a second because there is a line I wanted to eliminate, which I put on during the video of yesterday. So your 17th move was knight e4, and I discussed, so queen e7 was played, and then black has rook c7, and you can see that now the queen is gone to the east side of the board where it's doing nothing, and you can see that if you compare with the game, that black's queen is much stronger now than in the game because the queen is unopposed. It has strong pressure, for example, on the a pawn, which is very annoying for white. And white's queen is much worse than black's is. So what I wanted to ask at this point after knight e4 is, we can judge that that white's queen is a worse piece than black's queen. And one way to solve this is to exchange these pieces. So white, it's beneficial for white to aim for a position without queens because his queen is worse than black's. Now, my question is, how can you deal with this? So try to find a way for white to play. Pause the video and I will speak afterwards. Okay, so the best line is knight c6. Why? Because black is quite forced to take. And you can see now that the position remains favorable for black because of the open file. But the absence of the queens makes the position much more tolerable for white. So white gets away with it more or less by exchanging black's active queen. The tactical point of this is that black really cannot play queen b6. You can put it on pause and look for it, but it's not too difficult, I would say. It is like knight e7, king h8, and knight g6 is very troublesome for me. So that's one element. I have a second exercise, same issue. So at this point, so black played queen c7, he is very much active on the c file. We have knight d2 as a threat, which I overlooked. So white, in his search for a better move, has to take into account that that this is a danger. Again, what can white do? And pause the video to find a move if you want to. Okay, the move that white has is rook b2. Why? It's a double purpose. Of course, it's against knight d2. But the second thing is that you can find it by looking for the strong piece from your opponent that you want to eliminate. This is black's best piece, maybe even. So it's logical that you want to eliminate it. If he plays rook c1, which is best, then white has queen d3. This is not such an easy move to find. But on the other hand, you centralize a piece, so that's something quite normal to play. So from this game, summarizing, you played it very well, I would say. This rook c7 move was an improvement to chase the queen to the king side, but in the other game you made a note which is very relevant, namely that you should not be afraid of it because there are not sufficient white pieces in the attack. So that's okay. The second thing I wanted to instruct you from this video is that it's worthwhile to look what active pieces your opponent has and to try to exchange these. And this is the topic of the lesson that I wanted to give after I analyze this and the following game. So first, the following game, which was a competition game, of course. I think it's a very well played game. There are some elements that I want to talk about in general that I think that is interesting to pick up. But in general, it's a very interesting and also very well played game. So first thing to say at this point is your opponent, he played a3. This should be inferior to bishop d2 because, of course, you want to develop a piece. By a3, you kind of ask black whether he wants to do a move that he intends to do. Bishop c3 is very much common in this type of position. So he wants to play like this with black. And why encourage him with a move that is just a lost move? So bishop d2 is better. You can go for bishop d6. You can also play bishop c3 as you played. Now, I don't know, in your note you speak about a bad bishop, which is very good to notice that white has this problem, because it also determines the plans that both sides have, which I will say in a minute. The thing I'm not certain about from your note is whether you know about the so-called endgame between a good knight against the bad bishop. This was one of the topics in a very famous and very good book by Max Euwe. The book is called Judgment and Plan, Oordeel en Plan, Urteil und Plan. And it deals with certain positional aspects in a very nice way, also because it analyzes games from the old age, which are often very instructive. I remember that it also deals, for example, with the minority attack. Now, afterwards, I will send you an email, or I will do it on lichess with 3 links to games which were discussed in this book by Euwe, and which are very interesting to study or to look at. That's one thing. Now, he takes, so c5 is a very nice move, I think. You take some space, you put pressure. White, of course, can exchange. Bishop d2, and now I think we have a very instructive moment. Again, the specifics of the moment in this position are not always easy to grasp because you need to calculate quite into detail. Also, the position is always not so easy to judge, but the general things are very important to see. So you want with black, as you say, you want to close the position. Or maybe sorry, there's one thing I needed to say about the bad bishop against good knight. Knowing about this, knowing that white has a bad bishop and black will have a good knight, can give you the idea of what pieces to exchange. So with black, you would like to exchange the knight on f3, because this really brings the bad bishop against good knight endgame on the board. Now, about this position. So you want to close the center, which is logical because you have 2 knights. Knights, they are better in such a close position. So it makes sense to go for a move like c4. If you play a move like c4, what you need to consider is that you lose the dynamism in the position. So, for example, if c4 is played, d4 is no longer under attack. And this gives white the possibility to move the e-pawn. And very often, white has a plan in this kind of position to play f3, rook to e1, of course, and then e4, and take the center, which is, of course, a very good thing if he can achieve this. It's not easy to achieve at all, because, for example, the knight is not such a great piece here. But that's a thing that white can do. Secondly, and this is more important, you think about what you want to do. You want to close a position. What you didn't think about was your opponent's plan. What does he want to do? And maybe you can again have a small break, think about the position, and see, okay, what is white's plan? What is the best thing he can do? You can put it on break. I took some coffee in between. So white, he has the bishop, and with the bishop, he would like to open up the game, because the more open that the game is, the better the bishop is. You can, for example, imagine that if all these central pawns have disappeared, then you can put a bishop on c3, and this will be a very strong piece. For example, pointing at g7 and the king set. Now, your opponent, he had the same idea because on the following move he plays rook c1. So he has the idea, I want to open up with c4. What he didn't notice or didn't sufficiently appreciate is that you with black, you can take away the dynamism of c4, and then, yeah, his rook is completely silly, of course. Now, what white has to investigate at this point is the move c4 at once. This is, of course, a very radical move because it completely changes the structure of the position. But he needs it because this bishop is otherwise very bad. And it needs to be studied. Now, with black, you should have seen this, maybe at a certain level or from a certain level on. One should take into account what your opponent is doing, and you should prepare for this c4. Now, my next question is, he wants to play c4, assume. How can we prepare best for this? Apart from the move playing c4 yourself, which is a decent move, of course. But do you have another move that you think is useful for black in this position, knowing that white might want to play c4 on his following move? You can put an other break. Okay. The better move, slightly better move, is rook e8. Now, this is what Nimzowitsch would call a mysterious rook move, which means that he puts a rook on a file where apparently it can do nothing. I mean, it's looking at e3, and this is very solidly defended. So why putting the rook here? Now, the point is, if white plays c4, you can exchange, and you have an open file which you can at once enter. You will not enter it at once, but you can enter it at once. The second plan that you have with black is that you play c4. Then white has to go for f3, e4. But from the moment on that he plays f3, he has a weakness on e3, against which the rook is already very well placed. So that's the positive side of this. Now, what's the negative side of knight e4? The negative side is that this piece might become unstable, because if white plays c4, all these pawns might disappear, and this knight can be left hanging in the end. Again, it's not in this situation so, because black will exchange, of course, on d2, but it's something that can be considered in such positions. Here is a line that the computer gives. You can at once see that the practical calculation of all of this is very difficult. But the principle that black wants to close because of the knights, that white wants to open because of the bishop, is something which is very important to know. So knight e4 was played. Wait 1 second, rook c1. And now g5. Now, I must say, this is very daringly played. And obviously, you create weaknesses that you cannot heal anymore around the king. So all these squares were covered or potentially covered by the pawn on g7. All of these squares, they are now out of reach for you. It's not a problem for the moment because white's queen is on the queen side, not on the king side. But of course, you can. The least that I must say is that you give your opponent a clue on what he can do next. He didn't really have a very good plan, but now, thanks to this move, he knows that he might want to get his queen to the king side. And that's some new information for him which can be useful. So this is quite daring, I dare to say. It's also not necessary. Now, also, generally speaking, it's very important to know that if you make such an advance on the edge of the board, on the king side of the board, for example, then you need to be certain that the center cannot be opened. Because if the center opens up, and suppose again that all of these pawns disappear, you can see that white's pieces quite easily can get to the king side, and then you will be confronted with the weakness. So a move like g5 it's better to bring it into consideration after you close the center instead of before. Okay, so rook d1, c4. Also, maybe I must say that this move g5 is also not really fitting for the plan where you want to exchange the knight. So, as I said, you want to have a good knight against a bad bishop. That's a possible plan. So you want to exchange this knight, and you want to do this before you put any pawns on any squares, because these pawns, they cannot get backwards, and you can have a situation where the pawn would be much better on g7 or g6. Bishop e1 was played, knight c7. Now you can see that this is, well, the second thing I wanted to say about the piece. So in the previous game, I spoke about the queen and the rook, the active queen and the active rook of black that I wanted to exchange, that I needed to exchange. Here you have the worst piece that you try to improve, which is another very important principle in piece play. So you judge correctly that your knight on a6 is not doing that much, and you want to bring it to a better square. Very logical. But you can already see that here you give c6, and now the queen is already closer to the king side. Suppose your pawn on g7, then it would be no danger at all, no problem at all. With the pawn on g5, it's something different. Queen c6, and now f5. Now f5 is, again, I would say very anti-positional, because you give e5 away to the knight. That's something you should not do. There are certain cases where you can maybe force the knight to exchange. Then you can argue for it, but you should not do it for e5. Not so much because he can really make use of it in an aggressive way, but more like you give away a square to one of his pieces, where the piece stands quite well. And well, why? There is no reason why you should do this. I mean, you can always play f5 later on. By doing it now, you just give away e5, and it's free for him to grab. So this one, rook f6. Yeah, maybe I should also point out a certain line, namely rook e8, which is an alternative to f5. Now I will give you a computer line: queen h6, rook e6, queen h5, queen f8, knight g5, rook h6. So this line is still fine for black, according to the computer, and undoubtedly it will be correct. But yeah, obviously it's not easy to play such a thing, and it's very easy to make a mistake at a certain point with black. And you can see that the problem, or the reason why you end up in such difficult lines is actually because you play g5. If your pawn had been on g7, this would not be dangerous at all. I mean, the queen would never have gone to h6, for example, and you give away a possibility that he didn't deserve yet. So knight e5 was played, rook f6. Now, if you would play white, you can judge both queen a4, queen d7. These moves are about equal in value, but it's interesting to know that they are, they of course they lead to a completely different type of endgame. Queen d7 obviously gives up the prospect of exploiting the weak king side. On the other hand, if you have to do queen a4, you are going into your cage again, and it's also not easy to do something on the king side. So queen d7. Okay. And now I must say, in the following 14 moves, I believe, both sides play very well. it's a bit of an awkward position for both. White because he has this bad bishop, black because this knight on e5 is not easy to eliminate. So you are both kind of restricted in your plans because you both have to take into account what your opponent has obtained. For example, with black, you would like to do something like b5, a5, b4 with support to get a passed pawn. It's a very logical plan. And then the knight on a6 in support of b5, b4. But you cannot realize it because there's too much possibilities for white to counter this. And both sides, they do this quite well. So I don't really have much to say about it. You ask, for example, here, okay, e3 is a weakness. A weakness, you can argue it's a weakness, theoretically speaking, but the main element for calling something a weakness is that it also can be attacked and it's vulnerable. And I don't think this is vulnerable, this pawn, because you can do bishop d2, for example, or king f2, whatever, you just defend it, and there's no way that black can attack it more. So it doesn't really count as a weakness, in my opinion, because you cannot touch it. For example, the pawn on c3, you can argue it's kind of a weakness because knight b5 hits it. But again, it makes it also difficult. Suppose that you have been able to exchange these pawns and that rook a3, for example, is possible, then it becomes much more a weakness. Now, there are too many things that avoid it from being attacked, from being really attacked. And you can see it. I mean, both sides, they improve their pieces quite well, but at the same time, neither side achieves anything. For example, you have this passed pawn now, but you cannot do anything with it because white is going to obstruct it like this, and you cannot chase the bishop. You cannot do it. You cannot chase it, so it's equal or about equal. The main problem is at this point that your opponent he overlooked the tactical motive on the b file, and that's his problem, and why he loses. If he plays rook e1, for example, okay, you have a b file, but what are you going to do with it? Your knight cannot move at all, so you cannot make b3 free for a piece, for a rook to enter and attack. If you play a4 to liberate your knight, you give away b4 and he will obstruct the b file. Besides this, he has e5, where you are not in the place to challenge this too much. So he has passive pieces, but black is also, his pieces are also restricted. So that this makes it quite equal, in my opinion. And I think the problem is that with f5 and g5, you too early in the game, you gave him a few things, notably e5 as a square, which you could have denied him. And if his knight would have been worse, of course, then it's maybe a different story. So rook e1 at once is possible. Also knight e5 followed by rook e1 is possible. What he does, so at this point, there's a nice savior, which is rook d1. Again, with the idea that later you can take on f5. But that's about it. From here on, white is beyond saving. And you played it very nicely because there's a nice sacrifice, of course, and the pawns are too strong. So it requires some calculation also that you sacrifice the knight on top of it. But it was very nice. So these were the games that I wanted to discuss. I'm going to check my video is still busy, so that's a very good thing. I wanted to speak about the lesson that I prepared. So first of all, I will send you later on a few links of good knight against bad bishop positions. First, I wanted to discuss a game which I accidentally only saw yesterday or the day before yesterday. It is a game by which I played over by coincidence, and I noticed that in this game, so they they both play it quite well. I mean, for black, it's also easy to defend. So they both play it quite well. But throughout the game, it's very interesting to see how the importance of active pieces is playing. So you can see that white succeeds in getting the active pieces out of the middle game into the end game. And that's the thing I wanted to show. It's an old game, so the opening theory will not be very special. At this point, there's a specific structure, this kind of pawn structure. As a rule, it is said that that if you have a position like pawns like this with black, right, you should not touch these pawns, because any way that you do it, for example, if you play e5, you create a weakness on f5 and d5. If you play f5, you create a weakness on e5 and g5. But in this specific situation, f5 is best. Why? Because it takes away queen g4, which can be annoying. And also in certain lines, the pawn on f6 will be under attack. And this is prevented because there is no longer pawn on f6 now. So black plays knight c6. And I think from here on, it begins very nicely. So he gives away the bishops, which is a bit strange because he played this piece twice, giving it up against a piece which is only played once. Normally is not advisable. But he is looking to his remaining pieces, and he sees that they become very active. So b takes c. Here I have a further question. Can you look and find a good move, a series of moves for black? I will do away the moves that you saw on the right, but these were not necessarily the strongest moves. So I'm going to pause for a little bit. Okay. You checked a certain line, a certain move, I think. Now, my question is, do it again. But now, first look at the weakness in black's position. Can you identify principal weakness, and how can you profit from this? Can you try this? Okay, the strongest line is knight f4. Black can play bishop d7, knight h5, and f6 is the weakness that is targeted, bishop e7, knight e4. And now you can see that these pieces are really swarming it. So this is quite annoying for black. Now, Uber played it differently, as you maybe saw. He played knight d4, queen c7, knight e4. So he's also aiming for several weaknesses in black's camp, but they are slightly less vulnerable now because black's pieces are not really cooperating. In the line that I gave with knight f4, both knights pointing at f6. Now it's only one knight. Bishop goes away. Queen f3 with tempo. f5. Again, can you find a move for white? Put it on pause again. He played a very nice move. He played queen c3 with a double attack. In the long run, rook g8. Now, what is typical in a move like castling looks very tricky, but these days we know, of course, that this is quite safe. But the knight must move, then you have bishop f6, bishop e7. In certain lines, you have king h8, rook g8. But at the time, this was not so much in vogue yet, this kind of structure or this kind of solution. So they often avoided it. Now, rook g8 was thus played, which is also not necessarily a problem. Knight b5, queen b6, knight d6, king f8, and now he exchanges both bishops. There's, of course, knight d7. So we have an endgame. So black defended quite well. These knights, they were very imposing. They are gone now. So it seems quite fine. Now, what must black do now? That's the next question. Okay, in the game, queen d8 was played. This is a very instructive moment, I think, because suppose that you're playing against a stronger player. Many people will be tended to exchange as much as possible. And in general, this is a very bad strategy. And it's much better to look for your own active plans instead of for exchanging, because this keeps you more passive, while active plans, of course, give you more active play. Now, the good solution is, the best solution is rook g6, because okay, if he takes, you can see that black's queen is very active, can go back to g7 if necessary. If he plays queen c3, you have rook d8 and you capture the file, and you can also claim the file like this, which is also a very typical maneuver. Placing the rook on a well-defended square, especially as c4 is not possible. So this was best. Black played queen to d8, hoping, of course, that white will exchange, because then he has this open file perspective. But black will, white did something else. He attacks with tempo, and now the queens are gone. But white has the open file. So you saw, so far it was a middle game, and you saw that this active piece play was something which was really a theme of the game. And it remains a theme of the game because it's a rook end game. And in rook end games, they are, there's one rule, and the rule is you must be active at any cost. So you may give up material, but you must absolutely be active. And I must say that this is a very, very instructive rook end game for this purpose. So I will leave you for 1 minute thinking, what should white do? I'm taking some coffee again. So white played rook d7, which is very logical, of course, but it's not the best because black has a possibility to become active. And as you know by now, activity is the main issue. What move does black have to become active? Maybe you can think about this. Okay, the move that he has is f4. So he's really opening up the 5th rank for the rook. If white takes, you have rook d8. And you can see that both rooks are very, very active now. Rook d2 is very dangerous. Rook can go to c5 or b5. And this is only at the cost of a pawn. So this rook, if it reaches one of these squares, these pawns will fall, and you will have no problem with obtaining a draw. White can win with the a pawn, but it takes many, many more before he can achieve this. So rook d7 was not the best. Best is f4 with white to prevent it. Rook g4, h3, g8, rook. Yeah, sorry. I'm not following the game. Rook d7 was played. I will follow the game. Maybe it's also interesting to analyze this endgame yourself. For example, play it against the computer and see how it goes, or look at analysis from the computer, because it's very instructive to see how you deal with such things with black by playing for activity. So he played a5. It was very common back then, again, to look at. Let me put it again. It's not only common back then; it's only also common these days. And I think it's a very big difference between mastery and amateurs. So if your opponent plays rook d7 in a position, I think that many people their eye will at once be drawn towards a7 because it's under attack, and they will at once think, okay, how can I save this pawn? And the problem is that you are trying to find solutions for this, and that you will end up with passive moves because you are thinking about defending something. What a master does, in my opinion, I'm not a master like strong enough for this, and I must say that I always fail in this in actual games. But what a master does in principle is not going and look at a7, but thinking, okay, what can I do to target something, to generate play? What can I attack? How can I bother him? And that's the way that you can find the move f4, rook b5 or c5, or rook d8 if he takes. Now you can see that black in this game, he, this is an intermezzo. Here, rook d1 is better. You can see that Ewe is also doing the same issue. He's He's not thinking about improving the position, taking the open file. No, he's going for material. And this worsens his pieces. Rook b8, best for black is rook d8. Not looking for the a pawn, but for activity again. Again, check this with the computer. It's very interesting. Rook b8, b3, rook b5. You can see that he really does everything he can to defend his pawn and to make his rook as bad as possible. Because if white plays now c4, which he should have done, he really made a terrible rook of it. Completely voluntarily. He was not forced to do so, but he really did it all by himself. And this is a very good illustration of how one should not play such an game. So rook d1 was played. I believe, yeah, have a look at this one. It's also interesting to check this one. But the game continued like this, and now c4 was played. And okay, white is winning, but Ewe even managed to only draw this position. Okay, so this was one game I wanted to show. I wanted to show one more position and discuss this one, but I have to open up in Word. Yes, this one. So I wanted to ask you, it's the same theme. I want to ask you to put up this position on a board and think about what you should do as black. What is the question? Question is, you have to find white's active piece and you have to eliminate it. Like in our game, for example, I should have seen that your queen was active on a5 and I should have eliminated it. Or like I should have seen that your rook on c2 was active and I should have eliminated it. So here, how can you eliminate white's active piece? I will break for a few seconds. And I will then go to the game, which I entered here, like this. Okay. It's a game from the Yusupov series. You might know it. It's Build Up Your Chess and two others of these things. Very nice books as well. So you might have found that the active piece is the queen on c5. It's active, especially because it obstructs c5. Now, c6 was played. That's a correct move, intending this. Also notice, by the way, that if white plays this correctly, it's an equal game. So it's not that like that black is better or something. But he needs to play good to keep it equal. Okay, now he takes with the pawn, makes it a bit more ugly. But on the other hand, if the queen takes, he has rook b8, and you can see that he can make use of b4. So with white wants to keep b4 under control, also opening the b file along the way. Queen a7, queen takes is a very nice line. It's this one. And now king f7 is very nice because knight f5 is following, and it's fine for black. So queen a7, rook a7, bishop c2. Now this is very interesting, this moment. I wanted to ask you, can you have a look at rook b8? What do you think of this move? Okay, so rook b8 looks logical because you are taking the open file. Now, the open file in itself is not worth anything. You have to be able to hold it, or you have to be able to enter white's position. Problem is that you cannot hold it because he will oppose. Okay, you look, I'm doubling, it's fine. But if you look further, you can see that, that there is a problem with a5, and there is a problem with the hanging pawns. They are restricted on these white squares, which is very bad because the knight is very dominant. The bishop is quite bad, so this is better for white. So rook b8 was not played by black. He played c5 at once. And now he should play knight b5 or knight b3, suppose knight b5. And both sides have their strengths, their weaknesses, which makes it about equal. White exchanges, and this kind of pawn structure is very, very nice, very compact. Rook to f4 was played. Is looking for the activity of the rook and go to c4, for example. White has some piece play, but it doesn't coordinate. For example, if he takes now, you have g6, of course, and if he wants to activate the rook, but again, this is not so dangerous because these pieces, they are all attacking from a different angle and they do not work together. And here, White made a final mistake. Rook b5 was played. Better would have been this, but I will not delve into it. So rook b5. Knight d5, activity of the knight is very interesting. And now again, you can see how White is really not, Black is not taking too much account of material. But much more he is looking at the king side attack, at this coordination of his pieces. You can see that these rooks are very strong, cooperating. He's losing a pawn, but everything is falling apart. As you can see, this is final. So I will also send you a series of exercises from Yusupov's book dealing. I will put some instructions in it so that you can try to solve them. Please do not hesitate to give feedback on the video. This time I made it, so I will be sending it right away. See you later.